Good evening, Crypt Keepers, and welcome to Cryptique, where we discuss all things paranormal, occult, UFOs, metaphysical, hidden history, forbidden archaeology, all things truther, and so much more. I'm joined as always by a man who knows if some kids knock on his door in the middle of the night, they'll be leaving with black eyes, whether they had them when they showed up or not. All right, what's going on?
Absolutely true. I'm an angry old man. Get off my lawn.
That's right, don't knock on the Cryptique headquarters door.
Although it's black-eyed kids, I'm probably just moving. They can have the house. I'm out.
Please, let us in. We need to know if you need a new roof, because we'll be in your area over the next 2 weeks. I just tell everybody I lease. But anyway, so yeah, Ryan's sending kids home with black eyes. So I guess before we jump right in, you want to tell them what they need to know real quick?
Yeah, you guys know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, interact with it however you can. Sharing is usually the best way to do it, but you can also let us know what you think and what you want to hear, what you want to correct us on at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. You can find out what we're selling at cryptiquepodcaststore.com. And you can make a small one-time donation to help us keep the servers on at buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi.
Or a large donation.
Or a large donation. Or
you
recurring.
You can pay us tithes if you want. We'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. So with that out of the way, I do want to say thanks to some people who've interacted with us. So thanks to Hellcat Handler, Turnaround, Dennis G, Alien Scene, Old School Gamer, Zeus Marty Great Danes, JC, and Bored and Crazy. So thanks for interacting. You know, we got some likes, some follows, some suggestions, and stuff like that. So thanks to everyone who interacted. And with that out of the way, what are we talking about tonight?
My favorite topic, black-eyed kids.
We did this as kind of our first episode, and that was a long time ago. So we're gonna redo it and hope that it turns out a little bit better. And I think it will, because you know we've got a lot of experience with each other. So you want me to start with the description?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're talking about black-eyed kids. These are going to be teens or tweens that are alone or in pairs sometimes. Now, they're described as having all black eyes, not, like black corneas, retinas. It is completely black. What do they call it? The sclera, something like that. Everything's black. They open their eyelids, nothing but darkness, Ryan.
Yep.
Nothing but darkness.
Just like so we're just talking about Gen Z then.
Yeah. So
eyes are a window to the soul. There's just nothing.
Exactly. You look in, it's just a TikTok video playing. So they have pale grayish or greenish flesh, sometimes described as pasty or olive. They are gaunt or sickly, usually really skinny. They have old or old-fashioned clothes that kind of just hang off their body, and occasionally they're described as wearing Amish type clothing. So there's black-eyed Amish kids out there too, so just watch out. And often jeans and a hoodie, kind of trying to maybe be a little bit more fashionable, fit in. And I think that also kind of is like a gray man type thing. Like, you know, it's just, you fit in, you just look like you fit in, you put your hood up, nobody can see your crazy eyes.
A lot more contemporary to wear jeans and a hoodie. Because you never, I mean, Kim is off with some of her family this weekend and they were drinking a little bit too much. And I got a picture of some of the aftermath, and there's jeans and hoodies with the hood up. Like, oh God, no sunlight, no nothing, no. Just leave me, you know. What's that? What's the meme from Game of Thrones? Give me something for the pain and let me die.
I thought you were going to say Sentinel Island. Give me a coconut and leave me the fuck alone. So, all right. So they are described as having the ability to move in what I would call time lapse or teleport short distances. And you can kind of see this on old security footage where they will, you know, take a shot every like second or sometimes 2 seconds, and they kind of move along like little Lego people, right? Like just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like old stop motion. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So when they talk, it's described as formal, polite, strange, awkward, and memorize lines that they just kind of repeat, or they won't engage in a conversation. So you might say, "Oh, what are you doing here? Oh, please let us in. We need to use the phone." "Well, where's your parents?" "Oh, please let us in. We need to use the phone." "Well, what are you doing out in the middle of the night?" "Please, we just need to use. So yeah, so you get the idea. Sometimes they have a strange or unknown accent, and you know, there's a lot of accents out there that are difficult to understand, but I think that most people would know, at least in the United States, would know what part of the United States that accent is from. And then there's some other, kind of telltale accents like British, Australian, stuff like that. But they're saying that we don't really have any idea where this accent comes from. They're described as speaking in hypnotic and monotone, so they don't get excited. They don't really get scary, so to speak. Like they're not intentionally like rah, rah, rah. They're very monotone, which can be more unnerving in some cases.
Yeah.
And they don't use hand gestures. Their arms just kind of hang at their sides, whereas we know, we talk with our hands. We make facial expressions when we're talking. They're very just like a mannequin.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they've
a
got
lot like Men in Black, or at least the old
Mhm.
Men in Black stories that way, where people
Mhm.
describe them as being almost robotic or like an animated corpse.
Yeah.
Like it just
Yeah.
has lines that it's programmed to say, and that's it. There's no gesturing, like they don't know how to interact with stuff.
Mhm.
There are stories of people like, "Would you like to sit down?" And the Man in Black just like kind of looks and tries to figure out what to do, and sometimes they just awkwardly stand there. There's some funny Men in Black stories if you like really think about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit like this, very very stiff. Yeah,
Yeah,
no expression.
pre-planned.
Just it's like Woody from Toy Story. You just pull the string. Please
Mhm.
let us in. We need to use your phone. No matter what you
Yeah.
say, they're going to say the next thing when they pull that string.
That's very true. That's a good way to describe it. Now, they're also said to have kind of limited telepathic ability, and that they can subliminally influence humans. So people are describing things in these stories where there's these creepy kids on their front porch at 2 a.m. saying, "Let us in, let us in." And they don't know they're doing it, but they're reaching for the doorknob, and they're like, "Wait, what am I doing? I'm not going to let these kids in." So that's where the limited telepathic ability and subliminal influence comes in. Or they might say, this person sees them at the door and says, "Oh my gosh, I got to call police. I got to get these kids help." And they'll say, "You're just thinking this," and then they'll say, "You don't have to call the police. We're not going to hurt you." Stuff like
That's
that.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm more. Well, I mean, I hear both. I've read both, but yeah, the creepier one is like they're at the window of your car or something like that, and you're
Mm,
thinking of driving off, and they're like, "Please don't drive off. Don't leave us." Like they'll say it as soon as you think it,
yeah.
or at least according to the reports that people have put out there.
Yeah. Now, there's also infrasound, which, I love to talk about sound waves. So, infrasound can be used to kind of stun prey. Dolphins will use something similar to that. Tigers use it. Um, Sasquatch are known to use it to cause dread, vertigo, just a feeling of disorientation and kind of nervousness. And that's associated with a lot of encounters too. And then there was a woman that had an encounter that at one point went under hypnosis, and she said that the feeling of being under hypnosis is what she felt when she had this encounter with black-eyed kids. Like she could tell that they had kind of a grip on her. So what we're describing is kind of a creepy teen kid, usually described as, white or possibly Asian, maybe possibly Latino, but I don't have any reports of like black people, African Americans, Africans in any country that are, there's just no descriptions of African American black-eyed kids that I came across.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. What do we think they are?
Possibly demons. That's one of the
Mhm.
options. They looked like what most people would consider to be like a stereotypical depiction of evil. I
Mm.
mean, you can think of the black-eyed kids or the black-eyed just look from shows like Supernatural, things like that. A lot of shows and movies have used that, so it's definitely seems to be an ingrained cultural thing. And it's one of those things where I always feel like there has to be some kind of origin for it. Like there are a lot of scary stories about like, oh, I saw these red eyes. And people are like, well, there are no glowing red eyes in nature. And it's like, then why do we seem to be like evolutionarily adapted to be afraid of that?
Yeah.
Like, why would we fear that innately if that was not something that we had ever encountered?
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah. But, looks can be deceiving. Lucifer is said to be the most beautiful of God's angels, all that sort of thing. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's not out of character for a demon to try to look like something that would attract us to them, like in a nurturing kind of way by looking like a kid. Because I think I would have trouble not letting a kid in if they came up to my door. And of course I was looking through the little camera to be like, yeah, who's out there? Okay. If I saw the eyes, no way. But if somebody was like, I'm from, the next street over and something's wrong with my parents, can you help me? Nobody's answering the door, but they were just like, please let me in. Do not call the police. Let me in. Like, terrifying. What do you think, though? What's our next possibility?
Well, we have to consider a lot of things. There's a lot on here because we have limited, information to draw from. So that leaves us with a lot of possibilities. And one of those possibilities is multi or interdimensional, where we are seeing something that's maybe taking place in another realm, another dimension, another reality, and they're kind of just bleeding over into what we're seeing. Like they may be totally normal in their dimension, and it may be, this is what you say, and of course we'll let you in, and everything's all good and all that. But for us, we're like, no, seems a little fishy. So that could be an answer, that they're from another dimension, and this is just what it's like over there. It's similar, but it's weird and bizarre. And it's
Kinda
just something that we
kind of like Coraline with the button eyes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Just like an alternate version.
Yeah, just something that, we can't rule out because we just don't have enough information on them, even though we've got a lot of information on them. So I assume that you believe that there could be an alternate realm or a multiverse. Are you in on this as a possibility, or do you think, nah?
I mean, I believe that such a thing is possible. I mean, maybe that is what it is, I was thinking like, why would something just kind of bleeding into ours try to interact with us? But if they're trying to take people, which seems to be what they're trying to do, they're trying to get at you.
Yeah.
Then maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something they need from you, want from you, something that they're lacking on their side.
Maybe they want your fear. That's their energy.
Yeah, it's Monsters Inc.
All right, what's next?
Vampires, the traditional kind of baddie who wants you to let them in. Grayish skin, black eyes, only really seen around dusk or, afterward. Can't come in unless invited, which plays into what we've been talking about. They're also said to have mind control, or, potentially we could chalk that ability up to infrasound. That one I could kind of buy. I mean, that's a decent, maybe less than a vampire, more like a familiar.
Ooh,
like an assistant to. Well, familiar is something that is in the thrall of another creature and kind of serves them in some way. So like Renfield to Dracula. If you've seen the movie Renfield, which is actually fantastic, I think he has a pretty good definition of it, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. There's a really funny scene in that movie to me where Dracula comes into an apartment, and there's just this quick thing where they look down and notice that the doormat says, like, welcome, come on in. And that was enough to invite Dracula in.
Nice.
If you have one of those doormats, maybe put one that says, like, welcome, please knock first.
Yeah, or you got to flip it over and there's disclaimers on the back, unless you're a vampire, black-eyed kid, alien, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, aliens or hybrids. So this is an interesting one, and this has a little bit, goes a little bit deeper. So we know they've got the big black eyes and grayish skin, which is what we see when we're talking about aliens, right? Mostly. They're able to use mind speak and telepathy, which are things that the Greys are known for using. So one of the explanations could be a DNA split, that somehow these aliens or these children, they were able to, we talk about, stolen wombs and things like that, that they were able to basically create a split between a human and a gray. And that would account for, and we're not necessarily saying 50-50, right? This could be 80% human, 20% gray alien, or 90 to 10, something like that. And that may account for their human-like appearance, but with kind of
like a couple of details wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a couple things like, well, when we put this alien DNA, we cannot get normal eyes. They're always black eyes. But yeah, so we've heard about, alien abductees and people that have had their babies taken, basically. So maybe they're trying to get this mix of DNA right, and they're kind of testing out their creations. Like maybe they don't understand us as well as we might think. And they say, well, maybe, black-eyed kid 3.5 will be able to interact with humans. Oh, no. Okay, maybe black-eyed kid 5.0 will be able to do it. And they're just sending them out and seeing what happens. And, that's how we're getting these stories. And, maybe it could be that they are like these gray aliens are downloading their consciousness into these genetically farmed human bodies. So that's pretty scary, but that's a possibility. So maybe the Greys ran out of habitat or destroyed their home planet, and they're looking for ways that they can get back into, a society. So maybe they're trying just to assimilate into the population, or these are like
Like, please let
Manchurian
us in. We need
candidates.
to breed with you.
Yeah. Or these are like Manchurian candidates that if they can get this right and they can have X amount of people assimilate into society and get roles that are leadership roles and things like that, maybe they can kind of take over from within, right?
Mm.
Or maybe it's just that these Greys have such a shallow gene pool. Like we see that the cheetahs in a certain area are too genetically close, and they're going to die out because they can't reproduce. uh, th- their gene pool is so shallow that basically they're going to be breeding with like aunts and uncles and
Right.
cousins and stuff like that. So eventually they're going to fade out because it's just not sustainable to continue to breed within your own family. So, and it could be that they just need this outside gene pool to kind of correct inbreeding within these gray alien communities. So, what do you think about that? Where do you stand on the alien possibility?
I could buy that, especially with a shallow gene pool. I mean, the documentary series Star Trek has even had episodes about that where members of the crew or kids were kidnapped to be part of like a breeding program on some planet. Um, yeah, I think there was one where a planet was settled by a group of colonists, but like very few of them survived. And they've been cloning themselves to reproduce. That's how they've been doing it, and they're trying to get away from it. So they're just trying to get more people. But instead of being like, can you send more colonists here? They're like, we're going to trick you into like kidnapping your kids and a couple other members of your crew. So we can have
Yeah,
this like infusion of new genetics.
it's
So it
awful
could be kind of a similar thing. Like we want to appear as children. So you'll hopefully innately trust us and let us in.
for
And then
sure.
we're going
Yeah.
to take you as breeding stock or just straight up genetic material.
Well, one thing that we didn't cover yet is, if they're able to influence people subliminally,
Mhm.
then maybe they're just regular gray alien and or demons or whatever, and they're projecting this where you're seeing them as kids, but like we said at the beginning, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and
Bleh.
they cannot change your view of the eyes, because that's something that, like you said, we have grown to look at the eyes. We place a lot of importance on them, eye contact when you're talking to someone, stuff like that. Maybe that's something they just can't get right in these subliminal, almost like they're cloaking as children, but they can't fix the eyes. So that's a
Yeah.
possibility. So yeah, I think the alien possibility is probably my favorite so far. But
It's compelling for sure.
yeah. So what's
All right.
next on the list?
Yeah, next would be the jinn, which are generally thought of as evil spirits from
Mhm.
Islam. And so, as far as my understanding goes, with the jinn, they are like a supernatural being created by God using
Mhm.
smokeless fire, which I did not know this before researching this a little bit, that humans
Mhm.
are supposed to be made from clay and angels are made from light, and
Mhm.
jinn are made from smokeless fire. They're mentioned in a couple different sources. They have free will. So they can be evil or they can be good. They have the ability to shapeshift. They can become invisible if they choose to. They have their own sort of society and structure.
Yeah.
They are capable of benevolence and malevolence. So some are good, but mostly they seem to be seen as bad, or maybe it's just that the stories of them being bad are a lot more interesting. But they have a tendency to lead people astray, I guess is probably a good way of saying it. So the idea
Yeah.
that they can shapeshift, they have a little bit of, this ability to kind of use the force to control your mind, for lack of a better way of putting that.
Sure.
They want to lead you down some kind of path or maybe take you away from God. I think that's probably where that comes from. I'm not so sure that I buy that one. I think
Ye
the gray thing is probably a little bit better because I like your explanations. The pallid skin color, all that stuff being related to characteristics you can't hide.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that explanation.
Yeah, and you know, there's just not a bunch of, like, I think if they were Jinn, I think that there would be stories coming from, Muslim countries, or countries that have a huge Muslim population,
True.
that you would be hearing this stuff, and we
Yeah,
just really don't.
yeah, and we just talked about the fact that you only hear about white kids or black-eyed kids who appear Caucasian.
Yeah.
So you would
It's
see some, Middle Eastern, at least darker hair, slightly darker skin.
You would think, yeah. So I guess up next we have ghosts. So these could be the ghosts of children that have, passed away, and they're wandering the earth. They don't know how to move on. They don't know, what the next move is. And I'm just going to go through the Hungry Ghost Festival real quick, because this is going to show, I think, that a large population believes in these black-eyed children, that they could be ghosts. So the Hungry Ghost Festival, it happens during the full moon of the 7th month in the Chinese calendar. So they believe that the gates of hell open. So we're not talking about heaven, we're talking about hell. And it allows the ghost to wander among the living for a limited amount of time. People leave food outside their homes, and this is supposed to, appease these ghosts and keep them from, messing you up, basically. The food remains untouched, and I guess they believe that it's being consumed by the spirits, but it's still just appearing in its, form there. So they even leave seats open. So, like, if you go to a movie theater during the Hungry Ghost Festival, like, the whole front row will be left open for these hungry ghosts. So they will take pictures of cars and houses, and they even have a thing called hell money. And so they burn these pictures of the cars and houses to kind of eliminate their connection to, the natural world. And they have this fake money that they make, that they leave out for the ghosts. It's basically monopoly money to be used in the pit of hell. So they think that these ghosts may come around because they have not paid enough respect to their families, or because of these ghosts' past actions. So things that would preclude them from moving on. I would assume crimes, murder, rape, stuff like that. And in the Taoist beliefs, the hungry ghosts are restless souls seeking nourishment from the living. Now, what do they feed off of? It's fear, Ryan. It's fear. So, building and like refinishing, remodeling, and stuff like that can attract or repel these ghosts. And in a lot of these countries, they even have, like, we would have an architect, a carpenter, a plumber, and they have people that come in that use, I guess, feng shui and the orientation of which way the buildings face and stuff like that to make sure that these hungry ghosts don't come knocking on your door in the middle of the night.
Mm.
So that's interesting. They believe in it enough to have a profession dedicated to preventing these ghosts from visiting your house. What do you think of that?
I think I would like one of their business cards just in case.
Fair enough. I mean, we see that in a lot of stories too, where, oh, I was refinishing the nursery that was upstairs, and then all of a sudden we started getting knocking on the walls and hearing breathing in our ears and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
there is a precedent.
Yeah, I think, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately because Kim thinks this house is haunted.
Uh-oh.
And I know why I don't, or I'm fairly certain that I know why I don't. And I think it's just because this house makes weird noises all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it was haunted, I mean, there could be an intruder in here somewhere, and I probably would just chalk it up to random noises the house is making. Because we have like these, the house is kind of shifted a little bit. We have these like ductwork, these vents, and these metal panels that kind of shift and pop sometimes. And just the way the wind sometimes hits it, like the windows or the doors will flex a little bit.
You may have a Frogger.
I could, yeah. I mean, I've literally never been in the attic of this house before. It was checked out by the inspectors before it was bought, but I've never been up there. But the only entrance is out in the garage, so if they want to come go through the garage, fine. I always lock the door to the house.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm with you. All right. Well, do you want to run through the next few before we get to what they want? Because there's a few other ones that kind of we just need to run over.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a list that's not necessarily what we believe, but just possibilities that are out there. So one, is that they're the result of a fountain of youth? So they may have discovered some way of reversing aging or, use something with time to kind of regain their youth, but there are some severe side effects, and for whatever reason they need, I guess, victims.
Maybe they came out of Mel's hole. Now, we talk about Fountain of Youth. It could be a situation like Pet Cemetery, like, oh yeah, we're coming back, but we're not really the same.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Pets, a lot like Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay, so they could be test subjects of Big Pharma. They could be, I don't know, some kind of genetic experiment or upgrade. It could explain some of the different physical characteristics. Maybe they're out there performing some kind of test, or they may just be escaped and wandering around on their own.
They're Elon's unclaimed babies with his Neuralink stuff installed, and the eyes are actually night vision camera eyes. Hey, you just never know.
There's this meme that I saw a while ago that's like, it's Buzz Lightyear in like the packaging that says, "I'm Elon Musk's child." And then the next picture, it's zoomed out. It's the whole rack of Buzz Lightyears at the store.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that guy is like single-handedly trying to fix the population growth problem in the U.S. The fact that people are not having enough kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so they could be pranksters. Could be just a trend that got started, kind of like that clown thing a couple years ago. Although it feels like this has been going on a long time, and the clown thing went away pretty quickly. Well, this seems to still be kind of a cultural phenomena.
Well, we have to think some of them are pranksters.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that just makes sense that a certain percentage will be.
Yeah. Possibly drug users. Sometimes your eyes will be like totally dilated and then look really spooky. Not totally black, but if you have kind of small eyes like mine, it may look completely black at night, something like that.
Please let us in. We need to make more ayahuasca.
Yeah. Or imagine like fully dilated pupils and like broken blood vessels. So it's like red and then black. Ooh.
Creepy.
They could be clones of living children being tested to see whether or not they sort of pass or realistic. Maybe that's the thing. If you can get somebody to let you in, you get to be a real boy.
That's
So, like you said, they could be like brainwashed Manchurian candidates out there practicing these telepathic abilities on unsuspecting people, seeing what they can just get done through this suggestion and this power that they have. And they could be, I think this goes along with the first one that we said demons, but they could be children who are actually possessed. Because again, along with just evil having those black eyes, a lot of times in shows, again, like Supernatural or Charmed or whatever else, like when you're possessed, you get those black eyes most of the time in pop culture. And I know it's a creepy thing that maybe it just caught on from somewhere in pop culture. There's a good chance that's what happened, but there's also, I think, kind of a chance of it's ingrained in our culture because we've seen it happen.
Yeah.
But
100%.
What do they want? You want to get into that?
Yeah, so they always want to come inside your house. Well, you know what? Before we do what they want, let's take a quick break. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back, Crypt Keepers. So what do they want? They always want to come inside your house, your car, your business, whatever. They always want to be let inside. Don't do it. They need a ride. They need to warm up. They need to use the phone, which is, a landline in these stories, which nowadays, and we'll get into it, but every kid has a cell phone. So if a little kid comes to my door and wants to use the phone, I'm going to be like, well, don't you have a cell phone? Because everybody has a cell phone. Like I see freaking, survival shows with guys in the African tribal areas, and they're like, oh, let me just call the witch doctor, and they whip out their phone. Now of course I'm joking a little bit, but every kid like in the US has a phone, right? Or they need to drop a deuce. So
they're like, do you guys have a lightning charger in there? I don't have the 15 yet.
Right. So now they also play on emotions. And I haven't found any stories where kids come to the door, like answer the door for black-eyed kids, but they always play on emotions. And it seems like the best they can to be like, please, we're just kids. We want to come in, please. There's no sense of urgency, inflection. They just don't get it. It's kind of similar to when you see these YouTube videos and they use like an AI voice. There's just not like maybe the video is originally in Hindi and then they use AI to produce the English words, and it's just there's no inflection. It's just, hi, welcome to the video. The video we are watching today is about this. So they always say you have to invite them in. That's something that it goes across all the stories, right? It is common. You have to invite us in. They'll say things like, we won't hurt you. We don't have a gun, which I don't know. Like that would make me think you definitely have a gun. And then they also say this won't take long. Now that is the creepiest one to me. This won't take long. What the hell is this? I mean, what do you speculate that they mean when they say this won't take long?
Whatever we're gonna do to you or take from you won't take long. I do remember that we don't have a gun one though.
Yeah, I
Like
mean
that was a good example of like the telepathic thing. Like are these kids armed?
Yeah. And they respond, we don't have a gun. Okay. They're like, we don't have a gun. We've got something much, much worse.
Yeah.
So they can read your mind if you're apprehensive and they try to reassure you. So we don't really know for sure what they want. We know what they say they want: to use the phone, to get a ride, to use the bathroom. But what do they really want? We just don't know, because we'll go through some stories where people have had interactions with them, but we still don't really know what they want for real. So now we have to think about, where are they from? That's what we have to think about. So do you want to tell us where they're from?
Sure. All right, I couldn't get to my mute button fast enough. So if they're aliens, we don't really know where they'd be from. They do have a lot in common with descriptions of Men in Black, like we were talking about, including some of their odd physical characteristics and behaviors. Although I don't believe the black eyes show up in most of the MIB accounts. There's even reports of them being picked up in cars by what might be described as an MIB. We can get into that later. They could be from an alternate universe. Like we talked about before, there's a chance that there's something bleeding over or some kind of infiltration, I guess might be a word for it.
Sure.
Something that they need from our side. They could be, there's a lot of things that they could be. They could be time travelers trying to fit in, which would explain the clothes being out of style. Scientists from the future are trying to send back genetic experiments to see if they could fit into our society and be sort of accepted by us. I think it'd be pretty easy to misjudge the style by a decade or two.
Especially because it swings back around. You know what I mean? Like right now, what people were wearing, I think, in the early 90s is kind of what's back in style now.
Yeah.
So, that's only, like 35 years in the grand scheme of things. That's not a lot of time.
Yeah, it's not much. It probably would have been easier, like further into the past. Like, everybody wears kind of like a tattered wool jacket. Cool.
Yeah, everybody looks like they're wearing church clothes when they're working in the farm on the fields and stuff. It's like, why are you wearing suspenders and slacks?
Yeah. So it could be a military thing. The military is generally said to be like 30 to 50 years ahead of what we have just generally available to the public. In some cases, black-eyed kids are noted as having superhuman abilities like telepathy, the ability to sort of speak in your mind telepathically, and the use of infrasound. So there's a potential for them to be some kind of weapon or like a psyop. There's the demon angle again. They're just trying to mislead people, screw with people, shake their faith.
Yeah.
There's a case we can talk about with that. And then it could just be an internet thing, mass hysteria, like we always like to talk about. That it's just a made-up story like Slender Man that's kind of grown and taken on a life of its own. But there are a lot of eyewitness reports from all around the world. I mean, when we researched this before, I was looking on Reddit and other forums where there were people telling stories where it's like, it's not creepypastas. Like, they're supposed to be true. Talking about these experiences like what you were saying, like, we don't have a weapon. We don't have this. You don't need to call the police.
Yeah.
And then like the movements, the sudden movements, that's another one that gets me that I'd kind of forgotten about until you talked about it, that sometimes, I mean, there are descriptions of like you're at this door talking to somebody or like your car window and there's nobody over here. And then all of a sudden there's another one at this window in the car or at another window beside the door, like looking in at you. They're just not there. And then they're there.
Yeah. It reminds me, these, like what you're describing reminds me of the Tesla video in the second video extravaganza we did where, it just, we kind of pop up over here and then over here, and then we kind of disappear, and then we pop up right next to your car window. And I think that if this is made up and it's really just all made up, it's brilliant because it's easy for us to be like, okay, Slender Man. Yeah, there's probably not a 17-foot tall man that weighs 150 pounds walking around the woods, but we see people that could be black-eyed kids all the time. We just can't see their eyes. Like you could be driving down the street and there's a kid walking in a hoodie. Well, is it a black-eyed kid? Could be. Can't see his eyes. So it adds a little bit of spice to the urban legend or whatever, because there's nothing that, except for the eyes and then kind of the weird things that they do and maybe the skin, there's nothing that makes it totally outlandish. You know what I mean? Like if they said, oh, Godzilla's real, he's in the rainforest. Well, we could probably find a 150-foot tall laser breathing lizard, but we'll know that something weird's going on when we see it. When we see these kids, I think it kind of makes people question themselves. Like, am I legit scared, or am I overreacting? So yeah. So there's that. Let's get into when they got here. So I'm sure that there's stories of about black-eyed entities across time, but we're talking entity. When we're talking about just straight up black-eyed kids, the oldest one I found was 1950s Virginia, and that's a story called Harold Meets the Devil, which we will tell you guys about in a little bit. They became more common from the 1980s moving forward, and most people credit journalist Brian Bethel with the first well-documented case of black-eyed kids, and we will tell you that story too. But the accounts seem to be piling up now that there's, the internet. We can connect with people in Mumbai, in Malaysia, and Russia, and we can kind of scour the globe where they couldn't do that until more recently. So that could be great. There's more encounters that we're seeing that we can analyze and try and figure things out, or it could be, hey everybody, this is a really great joke to screw with your neighbor, or whatever. So it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. But like I said, the oldest account I came across was 1950s Virginia. But let's just go over some of the things that they are quoted as saying. Things for you to watch out for when you think you might be having an encounter with a black-eyed kid. What do they say?
Let us in. This won't take long. We'll just stay for a bit. We're only kids. Don't worry. That's another one that raises some red flags for me, because kids never want to be treated like kids.
Yeah.
Kids will almost never say, like, oh, I'm just a kid. Don't worry about me. They want you to take it seriously normally. So
yeah, unless they're trying to get out of something. They might say, oh, I'm only 14. I didn't realize that I couldn't take all this candy and come back and pay for it later. I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
It's like a defense mechanism.
Right. We need to come in. We need a ride. I want to ride in your truck. Walk me to your house. You don't have to think about it. This won't hurt. That's another creepy one.
What won't hurt?
Yeah, we don't have a gun. And then there are common after effects from after the encounters. I don't know of any account where somebody said that they let them in.
Oh, we have one.
Do we? Okay. Well, then it's not one that I read.
All
but
right.
The after effects of these encounters tend to be bad luck, sickness, depression, anxiety, insomnia, nightmares, post-traumatic stress, and some people even end up in car accidents after encountering black-eyed kids, which you'd think would go under bad luck, but it's a prevalent enough and specific enough thing.
Right.
Mentioning on its own.
And when we're talking about sickness, depression, anxiety, insomnia, and nightmares, we're not talking about, oh, they came to my door at 3 a.m. and I couldn't fall asleep. I was so anxious, but I slept great the next night. We're talking about prolonged episodes of these effects. So, I mean, we're talking a few days to, I believe, a few weeks in some of these encounters. So
in 1996, journalist Brian Bethel was in a movie theater parking lot in Abilene, Texas. He had just begun to write a check. Don't know why. That's a 90s thing, I guess, writing checks. When two young boys approached his car, he didn't even notice them until one knocked on his window. Bethel rolled down the window and began to feel what he described as soul-racking fear. The older boys said that they wanted to see a movie but forgot their money. They asked him for a ride to go get their money. They said, it won't take long. We're just kids. We don't have a gun. The last showing of the movie was already half over, and he told the boys it would be over by the time they got back. He said when he broke eye contact, he realized that their eyes were completely black with no white or color. The older boys said they needed to be invited in, but Bethel rolled up the window and sped off. So that's one of the ones that I've read before, and it's, I kind of forgot about that aspect of it, that a lot of people don't realize that their eyes are black until they stop interacting with them. Look away when they're like, no, I can't let these guys in. And then they're like, wait a minute, those eyes did not look right.
Yeah.
Like for some reason you just don't notice when you're looking right at them.
and that could be the kind of telepathy, like maybe
Really?
they can make their eyes look normal for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, and then like the spell wears off, or something like that. So
Mhm.
all right. This is the highway encounter, and this is from a man named John. So, John tells a story of an encounter he had while driving the late night back roads of Texas. He says on a long stretch of highway, late one night or early morning, he stopped to relieve himself on the side of the road and gaze at the stars for a few minutes. After he finished up, he made his way back around to the driver's side of his truck and was startled to see a young boy standing right in his headlights. He tells the boy he'd scared the hell out of him, and the boy immediately responded with, "I want to get in your truck." John said he felt a chill and looked around for other vehicles or houses nearby, but found none. The boy then repeated his statement, "I want to get in your truck now." John was puzzled and asked the kid if he lived around here, and the boy responded with, "Just let me get in your truck and we'll go for a ride. It won't take long." John was starting to feel uneasy and said, "I don't think so, kid." John jumped in his truck and started it up, only to find the boy staring in the driver's side window at him. John sped off, feeling the fight or flight response kick in, and stopped after several miles to collect his thoughts. He realized he'd been gripping the steering wheel so hard his hands were white. He decided to turn around, find the boy, and get some answers. Was the boy lost, hurt, or scared? He drove to the exact spot where he saw the kid and shined his high beams around and saw nothing. He also used a high-powered flashlight but found no trace. He then had a flashback of the boy staring in his window again, and that was enough to make him speed off into the night. Instead of stopping for breakfast, he drove straight through to the destination at a relative's house. He walked in, popped down on the couch, and turned on the TV to try to get his mind off the strange encounter. Later, on his way home, John once again stopped at the same spot to try to see if there were any homes nearby that the boy could have come from, and noted the houses in the area were few and far between. John didn't get a great look at the boy's eyes, but noted the pale skin. The other elements in the story are consistent with Black-Eyed Kid accounts too. The boy appeared out of nowhere and made demands in a droning voice. He didn't answer questions, but was persistent. The boy filled John with dread, and he says he still has flashbacks to this day, seeming to confirm at least a slight case of PTSD. So we don't get the eyes in this case, but everything else seems to line up perfectly with Black-Eyed Kid. And it's normal. They're called Black-Eyed Kids. It's the feature that we always talk about, but it is possible that this was a Black-Eyed Kid that maybe didn't necessarily have the all black eyes. You know what I mean? Just like an alligator can be an albino. Maybe one of these kids can be a Black-Eyed Kid with a recessive trait that doesn't, supply the black eyes or whatever.
Or like you were saying, he can only hold it up for a certain amount of time to like the scrutiny of somebody looking at him. And the encounter with this guy was just too short. It didn't wear off enough that the guy was like, wait a minute, what is that? Or it was too dark. Could have been in shadow.
Yeah.
All right. So next we have a man named Hector who was working at his family's Mexican restaurant in San Antonio and had an encounter with a Black-Eyed Kid. An employee noticed a boy in the back of the restaurant going through the trash and told the supervisor. Supervisor went out to talk to the boy, but he was nowhere to be found. Hector went back in, assuming that the boy had left, but the second he closed the door, he heard a loud knock. When he opened the door back up, there was a young boy standing there with his face pushed out from his hoodie with black shark eyes. The boy spoke to Hector in perfect Spanish, saying, "I knew you'd be the one to open the door. Now you're in for it." The boy started laughing, and Hector slammed the door in his face, and the laughter stopped immediately. Hector called the police and said there was a homeless person behind the restaurant that wouldn't leave, but the boy was gone by the time the police arrived. Hector was convinced that the boy had cast bad luck upon him based on the following series of events. Hector's brand new tire split apart on the way home, even though he hadn't run over anything, and the mechanic who fixed it said he's never seen anything like it. Later that night, Hector's oven at home caught on fire, and he was luckily able to put it out before it damaged any other parts of the house. The strange thing is the oven had been turned off for an hour before the fire started. That night, Hector decided to go to a midnight mass and said a lot of prayers to try to counteract the bad luck he believed that child had cursed him with. Hector described the boy as light-skinned with blonde hair, very pale skin, all black eyes, and fluent in Spanish. Hector continued with his Catholic faith, but decided to learn other traditional healing methods as well to kind of bolster that, I guess, and said the two don't conflict in his heart. He believes the boy was sent to give him a spiritual awakening, and he still thinks about him often.
So that one's interesting. I mean, the boy speaks Spanish, but there's no description of, I mean, when you hear Spanish speaking people, when it's their first language, they're very quick, right? Like there's more words that you have to get into a Spanish sentence because of the way like their cadence and everything is set up, where we would say, oh, it's a black car on the street. They would say something along the lines of, the car, which is black in color, is parked on the street. So they have to, kind of get in some more words in a sentence, and they speak very quickly.
Mhm.
So there's no word on, if there was any inflection or hand movement or anything like that. And then I would be interested to know what the tone was like too. Like if I'm reading a Spanish sentence, I can read the words, but you can definitely tell that that's not my first language, right? And I just wonder if it was the same way, where if, the boy was like, yo soy el, or if he was, I assume that when he says fluently, this kid's rolling his R's and stuff like that. So that's interesting. But yeah. All right. So now we have Harold Meets the Devil. So this is one of the earliest known accounts of black-eyed kids. And like I said earlier, this is from 1950s Virginia and a 16-year-old boy known only as Harold. According to the story, the teenager was walking home one afternoon when he came across another boy leaning against a fence as if waiting for someone. Harold attempted to speak to him, but received no response. He was just about to walk off and go on with his journey when the strange boy suddenly stated to Harold, I want to go to your house. You're going to walk me up to your house. It was then that Harold noticed the blackness of the boy's eyes. There was no white, just solid black. Then something even stranger and more chilling happened. Harold had begun to contemplate turning and running home as fast as he could when the boy blurted out, now don't you run away from me. You're going to walk me up to your house. Luckily, Harold turned and ran away faster than his legs had ever carried him. He later recalled to his parents that as he did so, he heard a scream behind him, a scream that sounded very similar to that of a bobcat. And they're terrifying. If you've never heard a bobcat, I'll put one in the podcast so you can hear it. Interestingly, his parents believed their son's account, and it's helpful that he was 16 and not like 8. Like 16, you're kind of almost an adult. So, especially in 1950. So they believed him so much that his father was said to have grabbed his gun and immediately gone out looking for the menacing boy who had demanded his son take him to their family home. His mother apparently thought their son had an encounter with the devil himself and stated that she would take him to see a local. Pretty scary. Now, that is something that is unique, I think, in that he's not like really being approached. He's just kind of being like verbally fished back in, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, no, I'm not going to go to your house. You come over here and, walk me up there and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different, but still very scary. And as far as I know, nobody in that family ever made any money off it or anything like that. So that kind of rings true to me. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I would agree. It's any story that's not like when the reports get too similar, that's when they start getting really fishy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like you said, when they have something to gain from it, when it's like when you've had this thing happen to you and all of a sudden you have a book deal for it or a movie or a TV show or something that's going to happen because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, what's next?
In January of 2016, a report appeared on the internet said to have come from an unnamed woman, or presumably a woman who did not identify herself, who had not only encountered black-eyed kids, but made the mistake of allowing them into her home. According to the report, it was a decision that she believed would have lasting implications. So I see this is the one you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
A woman claimed to live in Vermont and told of how in the middle of a blizzard one evening around a year earlier, a loud knocking sounded at the door of the house she shared with her husband. Thinking that someone had been in some kind of car accident due to the weather, the woman went to answer the door. A quick look out the window showed footsteps in the snow leading to the house, but there was no sign of a vehicle nearby or on the road. Now, feeling a little unnerved, she woke her husband up as the banging on the door continued, and he went to answer it. Two children stood there on their doorstep, a boy and a girl looking around 8 years old, so younger than the typical account that we've been talking about. The woman recalled that they were not dressed for the cold conditions, and she felt instantly unnerved by their presence. Despite her probable better judgment, she invited the two kids in. As she ushered the children into the living room, she noticed how her cats appeared to be afraid of these new visitors, with one in particular hissing at them as they passed. If your cats and dogs don't like, well, cats are jerks. If your dogs don't like them, that's a big red flag.
Yes.
She offered to make a cup of cocoa for them to help warm them up, and recalled that whatever she asked them, the reply was always the same: "Our parents will be here soon." She came into the room with 2 cups of cocoa, and as they looked up at her to take the drink, she noticed with horror that where their eyes should have been were 2 jet black balls like giant pupils. As she stared at them, they both suddenly asked if they could use the bathroom. She tried to remain calm, or I guess pretend to be calm, and directed them to it. A moment later, her husband's nose started bleeding, and then the power suddenly went out.
Oh.
As the woman attempted to make her way to get her husband a tissue, she noticed both children standing at the end of the hall, motionless and staring at her. Oh, like the little girls in The Shining.
Yeah. Wow.
How loud are they? How clearly can you hear that?
Pretty clearly. Damn it, Curly.
As the woman attempted to make her way to get her husband a tissue, I already read this. They suddenly broke the silence and said, "Our parents are here," before opening the front door and making their way back out into the night. Even stranger, she went to close the door. She saw the children getting into a black car as 2 tall men, both dressed in suits, stood next to it. So an MIB connection, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They too entered the vehicle and drove away. In the months following, the woman's husband was diagnosed with an aggressive form of skin cancer. And although she didn't go into specifics, stated that she also suddenly began to suffer from regular nosebleeds and described herself as being in the worst condition of her life. She is convinced that both her and her husband's ill health is connected to that snowy night when they allowed the 2 black-eyed children into their home. So back to the alien thing, maybe it's like a radiation problem.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. It sounds like they had reactions to just being around them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's kind of a stretch. I would like to know a little bit more about this skin cancer. I mean, normally they can detect something like this through, like looking at the shape and size of like moles and stuff like that, which I know is gross. Nobody wants to hear. But if they were given a reason, like, hey, your husband has fished every weekend of his life for the past 20 years and he doesn't wear a shirt or sunscreen when he goes out and he gets skin cancer, maybe it's not the black-eyed kids, right? So I don't know. I'd like some more info on that. But we ready for the next one, or you got anything else on besides don't let them in? Don't let them in.
Don't let them in. No, I don't have anything else to add to that.
Okay. So this is from someone I'm pretty sure was on Reddit. I don't have a name for you though, but I had a black-eyed kids experience 7 years ago. I was hiking in a forest. I sat down to eat something. A girl wearing a skirt and yellow shirt watched me from afar. She was around 9 or 10. So we're looking at someone in a skirt and yellow shirt, which is different from what most black-eyed kid experiences are like. She came near. I offered her some of my lunch. She accepted. While eating, she looked up at me and I almost pissed my pants. Her eyes were completely black. She smiled at me, laid her finger on my mouth, and then ran away. I was shocked, but followed her. She disappeared without a trace. 2 years ago, I was at the same place and saw her again. She was not a day older than the first meeting. I started to ask questions, but she did not speak a single word. I took a photo of her with my smartphone. She took my hand and pushed me to come with her to a small lake. And Jesus, there were other black-eyed kids swimming around. I don't remember anything after this. I woke up at the lake after midnight and checked my smartphone. The photo I took of her was deleted. I might get criticized for saying this, but I have to tell someone. When I was 9, I was in my room. I felt something brush and pull my hair. I thought it was my mom and told her to go away. When I looked, I saw a shadow rapidly move across the room. At the door was a girl in a dusty Victorian-looking nightgown with a greenish tinge to her skin, pitch blackish but purple eyes, and something was wrong with her mouth. She laughed and ran down the stairs. I screamed and started to cry for my mom. She came up the same stairs and she told me she didn't see any. So this is an interesting account. If I was pressed, like if I had to bet money, I would say that maybe she just fell asleep by this lake and had a nightmare or something like that. It's very different from all the other accounts, and I think she even kind of alludes to the fact that it sounds preposterous in her writing. So I think we take that one with a grain of salt, but it was a fun little BEK story.
Yeah, I just want to know, were the black-eyed kids like splashing, or were
And
they
where's
do they
this lake?
exist in water? Like, I don't know. After a hard day of like trying to kidnap and kill and curse people, they have to go to the lake and chill.
Or maybe that lake's the fountain of youth.
There's like a black-eyed kid getting towed by a little motorboat on skis, like with a Bud Light in his hand.
That sounds like a cover art.
Here we go. Yeah.
All right. So what do we have next?
Next, we have the story from your aunt, right?
No, we have Casper Cat next.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Oh, that was the one you just read.
No.
Yeah. Was your aunt's one?
No. Okay. So the aunt's account,
yeah.
just that wasn't my aunt's account. That I was going to tell her story right there, and then go for the next account. So
Okay,
I'll tell hers after.
Just listening to you tell it. I wasn't reading along with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have an account from somebody named Casper Cat from September 25th of 2017. I had just gotten home after a long drive and after nearly a whole day of tense fighting with my now ex-girlfriend. She couldn't handle my depression and I was tired of bringing her down. They say the sound of rain can calm a bad mood, but it only threw me further into myself and I became more and more agitated. The kind of agitation you get when you're depressed. Those who are would know. I was about to call it a night when all of a sudden I heard frantic knocking at the door. My heart skipped a beat as I heard a child screaming at the top of their lungs, "Please help me, please help me." I opened the door, but no one was there. Looking into the dark, I saw nothing but rain. I thought I was hallucinating. I closed the door and 5 minutes went by. I then heard another knock at the door with the same child crying for help, but again, upon opening the door, no one was there. The third time, I heard the same knock, but this time someone was there. It was a little girl. I turned on my front light, but it was really dim. I managed to see that she was wearing a large white tee, no pants, no shoes. Her head was down. "Can you help me?" she muttered in a shaky, quiet voice. For some odd reason, all that was in me wanted to hug her. Which I can get that little girl shows up in like what's probably a nightshirt, like stuck out in the rain in the middle of the night.
Sure.
I had never really been good with children, nor had I liked them. It sounded like she'd been crying for a while based on the sniffles I heard. It sounded like she'd been crying for a while based on the sniffles I heard in her small voice. My first thought was, "Where are your parents?" No sooner than I could think that question, she answered it. "I don't know where they are." As you'd imagine, I was quite startled and taken aback by her telepathy. I never thought it actually existed. She began to cry. While in tears, she asked again if I could help her. As I reached out my hand to comfort her, her small hands also reached out and gripped my wrist. Surely this was a dream. A bad trip, I thought. The tighter her hold became, the more I realized something wasn't right. My heart began to race as I swallowed a large lump in my throat. She inched closer, her head looking up a little this time. "Please let me in," she cried. I managed to use my other hand to loosen her grip. While holding her hand, the light in the hallway of my house turned on. I must have brushed up against the switch accidentally. The light shone on her, but nothing was out of the ordinary. Her hair was black and very long. She seemed to have a normal shape to her face. Her lips were a little pale. I imagined she was cold. But then I took note of her eyes. Unlike us, there was no white in her eyes, just black. I fell backwards in a panic. She stared at me and slowly entered my house. Her presence was menacing. Before she could get to my feet, she looked above me, let out a scream, and disappeared. To this day, I don't know what she saw or who she was. I thank God I didn't die that day. To whomever is reading this, which will be us listening to it, I guess, please, whatever you do, do not open the door for anyone. You do not know under any circumstances, especially at night.
Pretty scary. Now, this one had some emotion in her voice. She, was pleading and begging. Now, does that mean that it's not a black-eyed kid encounter? Well, we have to assume that they're getting better at disguising themselves. And maybe this was, hey, this is, BEK 5.3. And this one knows how to use inflection. Still can't hide her eyes for very long, but using the inflection got the door open, and it got her to where she could grab the girl, and maybe that's how they feed. She grabbed her, and the lady was terrified, or I don't know if Casper Cat's a guy or a girl, but the Casper Cat was terrified, and that's what this black-eyed kid needed. And then she was recharged, re-energized, ready to go knock on other doors. All right, so I will tell you my aunt's account, and this is also, we told this story on the Zombie Road episode, but this would have happened in probably the mid 1960s, maybe early 1960s. But she was at this house on Zombie Road that has a long history of hauntings. And she would have been, a young kid under 10. And she was playing hide and seek with a bunch of her friends. And the way this house sits, it's got a big flat front yard that goes up to train tracks. And then behind the house is a pretty steep hill that just at that time would have been pretty much rural forest. And so this one kid, Terry, was supposed to be the seeker. So he had his face buried in a tree and was counting as loud as he could so everybody could hear. And she found a place to hide up on the hill behind a big old tree. And she was looking down there and seeing him count, 1, 2, 3. And then she heard a rustle and looked over, and there was this kid that was supposed to be down there counting. It was Terry. And when she noticed his eyes, she said they were like shark eyes. There was no white, no color, no nothing. Everything inside the eyelids was black. And before she saw this, she yelled out, she's like, "You're cheating, you're cheating." And that's when she noticed the eyes. And then, she was terrified. And this black-eyed kid just laughed and giggled and then skipped off into the woods. And she looked back down, and Terry was still down there counting off the, I don't know what they went to, 30 or 60 or whatever, but he was still counting. So that's her experience. The kid didn't come to her door, didn't necessarily want anything, just wanted to terrify another kid and disappear. So it's a scary story. I mean, most of these are pretty frightening, but still kind of mundane. Like there's no, this kid ripped my husband's head off and drank his blood right in front of me. It's always just super eerie, creepy encounter. And it's just such a cool phenomena because we just don't know enough about it. And it, like I said, with it not being a cryptid and it not being necessarily a ghost, you could see a black-eyed kid in every teen you see walking down the street with jeans and a hoodie. You know what I mean?
And yeah, like you're saying, it's really creepy that it's like almost more creepy that there's no rhyme or reason to why they're doing a lot of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like the
absolutely.
little girl looks in, sees something, screams, and takes off. Or even the detail of the Mexican restaurant one where he slams the door and the laughing stops instantly. Like that's creepy. That's like something out of a thriller movie.
Yeah, and these stories are more along the lines of like if you were watching a horror movie, there wouldn't be a bunch of jump scares, but there'd be like this tone of eerie, creepy unsettledness throughout the movie that kind of messes with you that way, almost like where like Paranormal Activity, they had the camera on whatever for like 30 seconds before anything happened, and it's just building this dread, this feeling. And when you do stuff like that, you don't need to have jump scares, and you don't need to have a scary monster with big fangs and claws and stuff like that. So that's really interesting. Do you want to let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with final thoughts. Welcome back, Crypt Keepers. Ryan, what are your final thoughts on Black-Eyed Kids?
It's one of the phenomena I believe in the most, because there are so many accounts of it, and they're so similar in a lot of ways, but not so similar that I feel like it's made up, or that it's a lot of people trying to make their own version of the Slender Man story or whatever.
Yeah.
And especially the ones we're talking about where it's like they just want to screw with you, or they come in and they just kind of hang around and they act really strange, just standing at the end of a hallway, kind of staring motionless.
Yeah.
And then a weird couple of guys shows up and does pick them up and takes them away. Like, the fact that we don't understand why they're doing what they're doing adds to how creepy it is. And I definitely buy into it. I lean more, even though the alien aspect of it explains a lot, I kind of still lean more supernatural, like some kind of trickster. So maybe jinn, or something that you might call a jinn.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think it's real. I think it's something spiritual as opposed to alien. What about you? At least that's where I'm falling on it.
My thoughts are that these are part of some sort of alien breeding program. And I think that they are trying to create beings that can, mesh and fit in with society. And they're just not there yet. And they're going to keep trying. And it's possible that Black-Eyed Kids won't exist ever again if they have figured out, if these, aliens have figured out a way to make them not have these black eyes. There could be a lot of what would be considered BEK accounts with normal-eyed children if they have gotten to the point where they can eliminate these black eyes. So that may be why there's not just tons of accounts that are still going on, because they've figured out a way to fix this, and it would be along the same lines with their skin. Like, oh, well, yeah, we figured out how to make them look white or black or Asian or whatever based on their skin tones. They don't have to be grayish and greenish anymore. Maybe the green kids of Woolpit were black-eyed kids from, a long, long time ago, before they figured out, well, we can make their skin grayish and that'll fit more in at night. They don't have to be bright green, and we will continue to see accounts of black-eyed kids that are no longer black-eyed kids. They're gray skin kids or alien hybrids, or maybe they look exactly like you and me now, and we'll just never know. Are you a black-eyed kid? If you're a black-eyed kid, definitely shoot us a text and let us know what you think about the show. What'd we miss? What'd we get wrong? What'd we get right? And yeah, you can. I think you can even leave a voice message on Podbean. So let's hear how those inflections are coming along.
Yeah,
And
don't worry, it won't
yeah.
take long. It won't hurt.
Yeah, it won't hurt much. So yeah, I mean, I'm going alien breeding program on this one, but I don't know.
Fair
That's
enough.
all I got. You can give us your final thoughts at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, let us know where you stand on the Black-Eyed Kids. If you would like more stories, I'm sure we can dig up some more stories if you'd like to hear them. But as of right now, that's all we've got for you. You want to tell them what they need to know?
Yeah, as we said at the top, if you want to help us out, you can share this with somebody you think will like it. You can interact with it through your podcast platform of choice. You can tell us what you think, what you want to hear next at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. You can check out what we're selling at cryptiquepodcaststore.com, and you can help us with a one-time donation or recurring, if you like, at buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi.
And we really appreciate all the interactions and the likes and stuff like that. But sharing and subscribing are the biggest things you can do for us. And that's still just a couple clicks. You know, share the show, because if someone sees that you like the show, that's great. They might click on it and see what's going on. But if you share, you're giving them a present of us in whatever episode you like the best. So sharing and subscribing are the big things. We do appreciate the likes and everything, of course, but like I said, share and subscribe. That's the best way that you can help. And I don't know, that's all I've got for you tonight. Good evening, Crypt Keepers.